This man needs no introduction, but it says here that I've got to give him one. He is the current chairman of Beyond Blue. He is, of course, the former president of the Hawthorn Football Club, former Premier of Victoria, and a revolutionary, a fierce ally of the LGBTI community. Please put your hands together for Mr. Jeff Kennett.
Well, thank you, Dean. Can I just pay my respects to the first settlers of this community and their leaders past and present. Can I also, Madam Mayor, recognise you, members of Parliament, particularly Mark Evans, who with the AFL is taking this not only today but this increasing awareness very, very seriously. And Matt Finnis, who is now the CEO of St Kilda, but played a very big role when he was CEO of the Players Association in trying to bring about change. I'm going to also just point out one other person, if you don't mind. I don't normally do this, but Jill Stark is in the room. She's a journalist with The Age, that awful organ. But having said that, Jill has been a very strong supporter of issues relating to depressive illnesses and now this one of homophobia. And Jill, we thank you on what you have done almost as the lone voice initially, but now continually supported by many more. And if you haven't read The Age this morning, and I don't like admitting that I have, but I have, there's a wonderful article there on depression and an editorial which supports this whole issue of discrimination. Today is important, I think, for three reasons. Firstly, that we're here. You might not think that's terribly important, but I was informed this morning of a friend who was run over and killed by a car 2 days ago, which reinforces in my mind, as every day does, how lucky we are to wake up in the morning. And we shouldn't take the gift of life for granted. It is very, very special, and we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our family to really understand how important that gift is and then how we devote the rest of our day in terms of ourselves and then community. Secondly, it's obviously important because we're in a beautiful part of Victoria and Australia, and hopefully we're going to see a very good match. And then thirdly, we're here because of this cause. And this cause is a bit like where we were when we started on depression just over 15 years ago. It was an issue that wasn't talked about, mental health wasn't talked about very much, but as the wheels started to churn, so did people come on board, so too did people start talking about it, and so too did attitudes start changing. And it never changes as quickly as some of us would like. People often say to me, if you had one wish, what would it be? And my wish would be to end discrimination in all shapes and forms. And if you could do that, we would end up with a much more tolerant community. There would be less despair, less brutalisation, and certainly a lot less pain. And this issue, as it deals with those people who feel uncomfortable about their sexuality, not they themselves feel comfortable, but the way in which others perceive them in some way to be different, is a cause for great pain and at times can lead, sadly, to a great number of deaths. And within the GLBTI community, the suicide rate per capita is as high, if not higher, than any other community in Australia. So therefore, going back to what was said from my bank's representative, Stephen, wherever you are, what Jason Ball did a few years ago was, without a doubt, very brave. And I remember when he rang us up at Beyond Blue to talk about, he wanted to come out, he wanted to talk about it, and how he was riddled with fear as to how, firstly, he was going to be seen within his own club, how he was going to be seen in his own community, and then not knowing what it was going to do to him in terms of his opportunities years to come. And after he came out, I remember him ringing me up very quickly and two things have stuck in my mind ever since. He was amazed at the way in which his fellow club players embraced him. And secondly, one day when he was walking down his small country town, again worried about country attitudes in this particular area of life, someone from the other side of the street yelled out at him, someone he didn't know, and literally said to him something along the lines, "Well done, Jason." That is a very clear message, I think, to all of us. It matters not whether you suffer a depressive illness, it matters not what your sexuality is. There should be no reason why people should not be able to live their lives as fully as they wish, and that they should be able to be received and embraced in community as a citizen, regardless of issues about illness, regardless about issues to do with the mind, regardless of issues to do with sexuality. Now, I think there is no doubt that the wheel of knowledge is starting to have an effect. It's not going to happen overnight, and it is going to require more advocates and more people with more tolerance coming out, supporting people and encouraging people to be themselves. Jill Stark, in her article today, talked about, again, the footballer who is now left Melbourne, Mitch Clark, went to Geelong, and last weekend, you might remember, something happened during the match. He broke down and afterwards was in tears. In one sense, I loved that, because it was Mitch being himself, able to express himself without fear, knowing that because people knew he suffered an illness, which was not his fault, that no one in his club and no one around the ground was going to be critical of him. In other words, his public expression of who he was brought people with him. We often discriminate against people because we're being smart, because we're making a frivolous comment, because we don't necessarily think, but importantly, we don't know enough about the person with whom we might be having that conversation or aiming that barb.